Hi guys, for my project I decided to do a podcast on racial inequality. For my project I decided to do a podcast on how racial biases have affected our perceptions of crime and criminals. As a criminology student, I think that our personal biases have affected our crime system for a very long time. I also think that African Americans are considered typical criminals, and I want to explain why people may think that is. So first I'm going to be reading a quote. This is from the textbook. Do an assignment in which students conducted a survey on this. Do an assignment in which students anonymously describe their image of a typical criminal. Responses vary. Example, the Las Vegas, Nevada shootings, the Parkland High School shooting, protests and riots in Kenosha, Wisconsin, or other highly publicized stories about racial-based gangs such as MS-13. However, the general criminal, according to the overly middle-class white woman student, is a young black male who, in the process of drug dealing or gang involvement, commits murder without remorse. Recent examples from this assignment reveal the students' perceptions are pervaded with stereotypes associated with black men. For example, students have written hooded male with baggy clothes, black male, sweatpants and a hoodie, and simply thugs, according to McCure and Harris, page 285. There are obviously numerous stereotypes surrounding African American men. For years, people have targeted this population for being the most incriminating and dangerous population. The reason why this is because of the war on drugs. The war on drugs created such a stir in the population. Many black people were arrested for crack cocaine, but white people were selling normal cocaine like it was nothing. There are serious underlying racial biases that have continued to affect our incarceration system. These biases have led to a lot of people of color to be afraid of arrest because they know they will have harsher punishments than white people. It is our job as a nation to change these biases and make sure people rethink the way they've viewed our incarceration system for years. Another quote from the textbook is, incarceration data seem to support the perception of the black criminal that many students and others in the United States hold. State prisons house disproportionately poor, uneducated black men. This perception is reflected in statistics from the FBI's Uniform Crime Report, the UCR. In 2018, 87.8% of all persons arrested for violent crime were white, and 82% were black. In nearly all categories of crime recorded by the UCR, with the exception of gambling, blacks were overrepresented as per population, according to the FBI 2014. These statistics are indicative of the persuasiveness of the stereotype, which carries real-life consequences up to and including loss of life for African Americans. Even though it was proven that white people were arrested more for violent crimes, people still believe that African Americans are the leading population in violent crime. I believe that African Americans are portrayed terribly in the media as being violent or gang members. This has led to the biases and stereotypes about black men. Instead of broadcasting all of the ways that African Americans can be violent, we need to switch the conversation back to the real convicts, which is white men. These unfair criticisms in the media are furthering the nonsense that has occurred for many years. I think that many people have a very false perception of black men, and that is because of all the dehumanization. In the 70s and 80s, many black men went to prison for crack cocaine. They were in prison for a very long time, sometimes 30, 40 years. Some of the men haven't even gotten out. The stigma behind crack was mainly harsh on black males. Many black males are overrepresented in mainstream media than other population for crimes. This has led many people to believe that all black males must be dangerous because of this. That is so far from the case, though. They are just shown more than white perpetrators throughout the media. Since 1991, the rate of violent crime in the United States has fallen by approximately 20%, while the number of people in prisons or jails has risen by 50%. These increases in incarceration are primarily due to the war on drugs and the impact of the crack epidemic on black drug users. If blacks were incarcerated at the same rate as whites, prison and jail populations would decline by almost 40%. Further, when analyzing the ratios of incarceration, the NAACP notes that black men are imprisoned at more than 5 times the rate of white men, and that black women are imprisoned at 2 times that of white women. Thus, although violent crime has decreased over the past few decades, the imprisonment rates for black men and women remain racially disproportionately larger to stereotypes of criminality stereotypes largely perpetrated by the mass media. People still were incredibly racist, even maybe more than before. The retaliation from white people was so unjust and cruel. The Ku Klux Klan, or the KKK, was formed as a hate group against African Americans. They killed several people and they were terrorists in the United States of America. Although we have progressed since then, we have still seen unjust acts of racism every day in our criminal justice system. We are not properly combating racism. Instead, we are ignoring it. As a society, we need to step up and free wrongfully convicted people or people with minor charges. I also think that it is important to offer them help to make it again in society once they are free. That is something that is often forgotten, but maybe the most important thing. So when these African Americans get out of jail, most of the time they have nothing. So it is our job as a population to give them resources in order to gain jobs, get housing, get access to health care, but we do not do that after their incarceration, which is another one of the problems. In the film, The 13th, it was actually amazing the way that they explained how the criminal justice system has changed over time. During the American Civil Rights Movement, many African Americans were peacefully protesting and they got so much backlash from it. They kept going though, and during that time, being arrested was a good thing for African Americans because they finally had the power. During the 1970s, Nixon completely changed the future of crime in our nation. He was big on a war against crime or a war against people fighting back. He wanted to be very strict on crime and also had the war on drugs. We saw that as a crime, and that is how our system became so highly populated. It's still growing from Nixon's first orders. So Nixon's first orders in the 70s we still see those to this day because of how bad they were. Now I'm going to share a personal story. This is when I was 3 years old. My mom recently told me a story from my childhood when we were out grocery shopping. And I'm only giving this story because when I was little, I grew up in a very small town, so I definitely had some implicit biases because I had never seen an African American before. So this is a story about how my mom kind of taught me about like different races and all that stuff. Okay. My mom recently told me a story from my childhood when we were out grocery shopping. I lived in a predominantly white neighborhood with no experience whatsoever of what other cultures were. One day we were in the checkout aisle. I had never experienced seeing a person of color, so I proceeded to tap my mom and point out to this gentleman. I said to my mom, "Why does he look different to us?" I was also pretty frightened because I had never seen a person of color before, and I will never forget what my mother told me. My mom kindly explained that everyone in the world comes from different places and backgrounds, and that is why no one looks the same. She says that we are all equal and he is the same as my dad. At just 3 years old, I finally learned that no one was the same and that everyone was different. My mom made it a point to me over the years to show me the differences between us because she wanted me to know just what African Americans have experienced. She also wanted me to see that in person, so she took me to the George Floyd protests rally, and that also helped me understand way more about race and them all coming together to form an alliance against what is wrong. I know that I obviously was very sheltered as a kid because of my town, but thankfully my parents always made it a point to teach me about it. Obviously, I've learned and now know way more about African Americans than ever before. The extreme hatred that African Americans have faced over the years have not gotten any better. Many African Americans still fear for their lives daily because of our incarceration system. It is so unfair and these statistics prove that. Because of all the stigma and racial remarks made from politicians over the years, the issue has not gotten any better. As a nation, we must change everyone's perspective on our incarceration system and point out how truly unfair it is. As a criminology student, my hope for the future is that the media will stop portraying African Americans as dangerous people and instead show the real dangerous people, which is white men. We need to fully admit our wrongs as a nation in order to see a difference. We cannot rely on the media for our information because obviously they disproportionately call out African Americans. I hope that everyone can learn a lesson from this so we can progress as a united nation and people will learn that our system has been overly biased for several years.